Our modern guitar heroes are bringing in a bunch of new approaches to guitar, and I absolutely love to see the different directions guitar can be taking in. But learning extended guitar techniques is not obvious. Teachers are often not familiar with these unusual approaches, and so we really only have our idols to learn from. But listening to and analyzing their work isn't always easy either, nor are these artists always willing to reveal how it's all done. This, on top of their developed control of the techniques, can feel like a huge, insurmountable mountain that we just can't see ourselves achieving. For this video, I've decided to challenge myself by setting my own feelings of overwhelm aside and seeing what I can achieve with only 7 days of thumping practice. I broke my approach down into 3 different sections: basic technique practice, exploration of different patterns, and finally writing an etude with the different things that I've learned. By the way, you can download PDFs of the exercises and the final etude, including a backing track, on my Patreon. First, in case you don't know, some context. Thumping is a technique that originated with bass guitar, quite similar to a technique you might be more familiar with, slapping. Now, Tosin Abasi is probably one of the most well-known thumpers out there today, and he supposedly learned the technique from Evan Brewer, who studied with Reggie Wooden, Victor Wooden's brother. The difference between slapping and thumping is that a slap will typically bounce off the string, while a thump actually pushes through the string. This allows you to do an upstroke with your thumb on the way back to your neutral position, which gives it that double slap sound. You can expand this by adding in more fingers for different note groupings, each of which have their own percussive flavor. To kick this week-long journey off, I started by creating a practice routine for myself. I broke this routine down into a handful of exercises, starting with single string exercises. I then go over a couple multi-string exercises, some of which were in different time signatures. For an extra challenge, I add in hammer-ons from nowhere with more melodic skill-based ideas. I don't expect to make much progress on these, but I found the concept inspiring, which is really the only reason you need to add it into your practice. For my first session, I kept everything at a steady 60 BPM. This is a mostly manageable tempo, and it allowed me to focus and get used to the hand movements. Day 2 felt more familiar already. Something I noticed early on was that I managed to get a more consistent thump if I imagined turning my hand like you would a doorknob. Instead of everything coming from just your fingers, this way muscles from your entire arm are included in the movement. On day 3, I decided to bump the speed up a bit. I also let my fingernails grow out for this experiment, which got me a slightly more percussive, brighter sound. I'm personally not a fan of grown out nails, but sometimes it's worth the sacrifice if it makes your tone sound better. Similarly, another speed bump happened on day 5. Most of the exercises felt a lot more comfortable. Some odd time signatures still tripped me up, which was kind of a hint for where I was going to take things for my final piece of music. The final day was the last push for speed. Overall, every 2 days, I'd increase the BPM, which eventually got me to around 120. Some exercises felt pretty decent, up to 140 on a good day. Of course, longer note durations can be taken to higher speeds, and so the music I play will greatly impact what kind of rhythms I can pull off. As expected, I'm nowhere near Tosin's speeds, but that's okay because this did give me a lot of ideas that I can already apply to music. Throughout the 7 days, I started to notice which patterns felt good to play and which ones I enjoyed to hear. Patterns like straight 16th notes felt easier to control over various speeds, and so I felt more comfortable with how I divided those up. I took this as an opportunity to try out different patterns by subdividing a measure of 16 notes into groupings of 2, 3, 4, and 5. Some came quite naturally, but I've also tried randomizing this sequence a couple times, which led to some interesting results. Some of my favorite ones were 2, 4, 2, 4, 4, 5, 3, 3, 5, and 2, 4, 2, 3, 5. Another way I like to come up with these patterns is by playing over random songs and making up rhythms that work well within their context. Listening to artists like Square Pusher or Charlie XCX all lead to vastly different results. The most important thing with these subdivisions is finding one that works for the song. A pattern that sounds super interesting on its own can sound totally out of place in some contexts, which was important to keep in mind. For the final piece of music, I decided to focus on those patterns that came more natural to me while still challenging me at higher speeds. This balance is something I like to find for any technique or pattern that piques my curiosity, as it pushes me to practice and leads to music that resonates with me in some kind of way. In this etude, I applied different 16th note groupings to a chord progression, and then I made a little beat around it to make it more fun to play. And so, here's what I came up with. Generally, I recommend writing little studies like this, or even entire songs, out of material that originally were meant to be exercises. Good old technique practice is great, no doubt, but ultimately we want to make music, and this is a very natural way of both practicing and applying the sounds you like to hear. It's also a great way of getting those ideas in your head out into a finished piece of music, either for yourself or for the world to hear. One of my main takeaways from this experience is that it's about submerging yourself in a technique up to a point where you can add it to your toolbox. You don't have to be as fast or use as crazy rhythms as someone like Tosin Abasi, Josh Martin, or that one unhinged Instagram guitarist. A technique like this can be used in many different ways, of which even simpler approaches can add a beautiful, unique sound to your music, all of which is worth exploring. In the process, we stumble upon happy little accidents in new contexts that we haven't heard before. Some ideas fall flat, absolutely, but others stick, and this is where we have an opportunity to develop our own sound. Break your goals down logically. Don't aim for perfection and try to compete with your favorite guitar hero from day one. Instead, ask how you can make it musical and applicable to yourself. What kind of music do you like, and what would that require you to do? If it's overwhelming, how can you start by making a simpler version of that first? I really hope you try this out for yourself. I'm convinced that even half an hour a day is going to lead you to discover things you otherwise wouldn't have, so definitely share your insights with us in the comments. And if you want some personal help, I've got a few lesson slots available, so feel free to reach out via any of my socials. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time.